Now it remains to show that no reason taken from the side of the production of things can compel it to the same thing. For the common position of the philosophers, who posit that nothing can be made out of nothing, from which the first reason proceeded, has truth according to the fact that it is made, which they themselves considered. For since all our knowledge begins with sense, which is particular, human consideration has progressed from particular considerations to universal ones. Wherefore those who sought the principle of things considered only the particular factions of beings, inquiring how either this fire or this stone is made. And therefore the first, considering the becoming of things more externally than it ought to be, held that a thing is made only according to certain accidental dispositions, as rare, dense, and the like, saying that consequently nothing is made but altered, because they understood each thing to be made from being in act. The latter, however, more intrinsically, considering the faction of things, they proceeded to the becoming of things according to their substance, positing that it is not necessary for anything to be made from a being in act except by accident, but by itself from a being in potentiality. Now this becoming of a being from any kind of being is the action of a particular being, which indeed takes place insofar as this being exists, such as man or fire, but not insofar as it exists universally. For there was a being before that which is changed into this being. But going more deeply to the origin of things, they considered the procession to the last of the whole being created from one first cause, as is clear from the reasons given above showing this. But in this procession of the whole being from God, it is not possible for anything to be made from something else that precedes it, for it would not be the making of the whole created being. And indeed, this faction was not reached by the first naturalists, whose common opinion was that nothing should come from nothing. Or if those who touched it, they did not properly consider the name of faction to belong to it, since the name of faction implies motion or change. But in this origin of the whole being from one first being, the transformation of one being into another cannot be understood, as has been shown. For this reason it does not belong to the natural philosopher to consider the origin of such things, but to the first philosopher, who considers common being and things that are separate from motion. However, under a certain similitude, we also transfer the name of the party to that origin, so that we may say those acts whose essence or nature originates from others. For this reason it does not belong to the natural philosopher to consider the origin of such things, but to the first philosopher, who considers common being and things that are separate from motion. However, under a certain similitude we also transfer the name of the party to that origin, so that we may say those acts whose essence or nature originates from others. For this reason it does not belong to the natural philosopher to consider the origin of such things, but to the first philosopher, who considers common being and things that are separate from motion. However, under a certain similitude, we also transfer the name of the party to that origin, so that we may say those acts whose essence or nature originates from others. From this it is clear that neither the second reason concludes from necessity, which was taken from the reason of motion. For creation can only be called change according to a metaphor, inasmuch as the created thing is considered to have being after non-being, by reason of which something is said to be made from another, even things which have no mutual transformation. From this alone that one of them is after the other, as day from night. Nor can the reason of motion, led to this, do anything. For what is in no way does not exist in any way, so that it may be concluded that when it begins to exist, it has a different way of being now and before. From this also it is clear that it is not necessary for any passive power to precede the entire created being, as the third reasoning concluded. For this is necessary in those things which take the principle of being by motion, because motion is the act of existing in potentiality. But it was possible for a being to have been created before it was, by the power of an agent, by which it began to be, or because of the relationship of the terms, in which no inconsistency is found, which indeed is said to be possible according to no power, as is clear from the Philosopher in 5 Metaphysics. For this predicate, which is being, is not inconsistent with this subject, which is the world or man, just as a commensurable is inconsistent with a diameter. And so it follows that it is not impossible to be, and consequently that it is possible to be before it was, even without any power existing. But in these things which are done by motion, it is also clear from this that the fourth reason does not conclude the purpose. For to be made is not at the same time as the being of a thing in those things which are made by motion, in whose becoming is found succession. But in those things which are not made by motion, there is no becoming before being. It is therefore evident that nothing prevents us from positing that the world did not always exist. What the Catholic faith states, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. And Proverbs 8:12, it is said of God, before he did anything from the beginning, and the rest.